Good morning, guys. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be the second episode of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and we left off in the second chapter at the very end. They are getting ready to celebrate Christmas, so let's get started. On Christmas night, a dozen girls piled onto the bed, which was the dress circle, and sat before the blue and yellow chintz curtains in a most flattering state of expectancy. There was a good deal of rustling and whispering behind the curtain, a trifle of lamp smoke, and an occasional giggle from Amy, who was apt to get hysterical in the excitement of the moment. Presently a bell sounded, the curtains flew apart, and the operatic tragedy began. A gloomy wood, according to the one playbill, was represented by a few shrubs in pots, green baize on the floor, and a cave in the distance. This cave was made with clothes, a horse for a roof, bureau for walls, and in it was a small furnace full blast, with a black pot on it and an old witch bending over it. The stage was dark, and the glow of the furnace had a fine effect, especially as real steam issued from the kettle, which the witch took off the cover. A moment was allowed for the first thrill to subside, when Hugo the villain stalked in with a clanking sword at his side, a slouching hat, black beard, and mysterious cloak, and the boots. After pacing to and fro in much agitation, he struck his forehead and burst out in a wild strain, singing of his hatred for Rodrigo, his love for Zara, and his pleasing resolution to kill the one and win the other. The gruff tones of Hugo's voice, with an occasional shout when his feelings overcame him, were very impressive, and the audience applauded the moment he paused for breath. Bowing with the air of one accustomed to public praise, he stole the cavern and ordered Hagar to come forth with a commanding, "What ho, minion! I need thee!" Out came Meg, with gray horsehair hanging from her face, a red and black robe, a staff, a cabalistic signs upon her cloak. Hugo demanded a potion to make Zara adore him, and one to destroy Rodrigo. Hagar, in a fine dramatic melody, promised both, and proceeded to call up the spirit who would bring the love philtre. "Hither, hither from thy home, airy sprite, I bid thee come. Born of roses, fed on dew, charms and potions canst thou brew. Bring me here with elfin speed the fragrant philtre which I need. Make it sweet and swift and strong. Spirit, answer now my song." A soft strain of music sounded. Then at the back of the cave appeared a little figure in cloudy white, with glittering wings, golden hair, and garland of roses on its head. Waving a wand, it sang, "Hither I come from my airy home. Afar in the silver moon, take the magic spell and use it well, or its potion will vanish soon." And dropping a small gilded bottle at the witch's feet, the spirit vanished. Another chant from Hagar produced another apparition. Not a lovely one. One with a bang and ugly black imp appeared, and having croaked a reply, tossed a dark bottle at Hugo and disappeared with a mocking laugh. Having warbled his thanks and put the potions in his boots, Hugo departed, and Hagar informed the audience that as he killed a few of her friends in times past, she had cursed him, and intends to thwart his plans and be revenged on him. Then the curtain fell, and the audience reposed and ate candy while discussing the merits of the play. A good deal of hammering went on before the curtain rose, but when it became evident what a masterpiece of stage carpentry had been got up, no one murmured at the delay. It was truly superb. A tower rose to the ceiling. Halfway up appeared a window with a lamp burning in it, and behind the white curtain appeared Zara in a lovely blue and silver dress, waiting for Rodrigo. He came in gorgeous array, with plumed hat, red cloak, chestnut locks, a guitar, and the boots, of course. Kneeling at the foot of the tower, he sang a serenade in melting tones. Zara replied, and after a musical dialogue consented to fly. Then came the grand effect of the play. Rodrigo produced a rope ladder with 5 steps to it, threw up one end, and invited Zara to descend. Timidly she crept from her lattice, put her hand on Rodrigo's shoulder, and was about to leap gracefully down when, alas! Alas for Zara! She forgot her train. It caught in the window, the tower tottered, leaned forward, fell with a crash, and buried the unhappy lovers in the ruins. A universal shriek arose from the russet booths, waved wildly from the wreck, and a golden head emerged, exclaiming, "I told you so! I told you so!" With a wonderful presence of mind, Don Pedro, the cruel sire, rushed in, dragged out his daughter with a hasty aside. "Don't laugh, act as if it was all right," and ordering Rodrigo up, banished him from the kingdom with a wrath and scorn. Though decidedly shaken by the fall from the tower upon him, Rodrigo defied the old gentleman and refused to stir. This dauntless example fired Zara. She also defied her sire. He ordered them both to the deepest dungeons of the castle. A stout little retainer came in with chains and led them away, looking very much frightened, and evidently forgetting the speech he ought to have made. Act third was the castle hall, and here Hagar appeared, having come to free the lovers and finish Hugo. She hears him coming and hides, sees him put the potions into 2 cups of wine, and bid the timid little servant, "Bear them to their captives in their cells, and tell them I shall come anon." The servant takes Hugo aside to tell him something, and Hagar changes the cups for 2 others, which are harmless. Fernando, the minion, carries them away, and Hagar puts back the cup which holds the poison meant for Rodrigo. Hugo, getting thirsty after a long warble, drinks it, loses his wits, and after a good deal of clutching and stamping, falls flat, and dies, while Hagar informs him what she has done in a song of exquisite power and melody. This was truly a thrilling scene, though some persons might have thought that the sudden tumbling down a quantity of long red hair rather marred the effect of the villain's death. He was called before the curtain, with great propriety appeared, leading Hagar, whose singing was considered more wonderful than all of the rest of the performance put together. Act 4 displayed the despairing Rodrigo on the point of stabbing himself because he had been told that Zara had deserted him. Just as the dagger is at his heart, a lovely song is sung under his window, informing him that Zara is true but in danger, and he can save her if he will. A key is thrown in which unlocks the door, and in a spasm of rapture he tears off his chains and rushes to find and rescue his lady love. Act Fifth opened with a stormy scene between Zara and Don Pedro. He wishes her to go into a convent, but she won't hear of it, and after a touching appeal, is about to faint when Rodrigo dashes in and demands her hand. Don Pedro refuses because he is not rich. They shout and gesticulate tremendously, but cannot agree, and Rodrigo is about to bear away the exhausted Zara when the timid servant enters with a letter and a bag from Hagar, who has mysteriously disappeared. The latter informs the party that she bequeaths untold wealth to the young pair and an awful doom to Don Pedro if he doesn't make them happy. The bag is opened, and several quarts of tin money shower down upon the stage till it is quite glorified with glitter. This entirely softens the stern sire. He contents without a murmur. All join in joyful chorus, and the curtain falls upon the lovers kneeling to receive Don Pedro's blessing in attitudes of the most romantic grace. Tumultuous applause followed, but received an unexpected check, for the cot bed on which the dress circle was built suddenly shut up and extinguished the enthusiastic audience. Rodrigo and Don Pedro flew to the rescue, and all were taken out unhurt, though many were speechless with laughter. The excitement had hardly subsided when Hannah appeared with Miss March's compliments and with the ladies walked down to supper. This was a surprise even to the actors when they saw the table. They looked at one another in rapturous amazement. It was like Marmee to get up a little treat for them, but anything so fine as this was unheard of, since the departed days of plenty. There was ice cream, actually 2 dishes of it, pink and white, and a cake, fruit, and distracting French bonbons, and in the middle of the table 4 great bouquets of hothouse flowers. It quite took their breath away, and they stared at first at the table, then at their mother, who looked as if she enjoyed it immensely. "Is it fairies?" asked Amy. "Santa Claus," said Beth. "Mother did it," said Meg, and smiled her sweetest in spite of her gray beard and white eyebrows. "Aunt March had a good fit and sent the supper," cried Joe with a sudden inspiration. "All wrong. Old Mr. Lawrence sent it," replied Mrs. March. "The Lawrence boy's grandfather? What in the world would put such a thing into his head? We don't know him," exclaimed Meg. "Hannah told one of his servants about your breakfast party. He is an odd old gentleman, but that pleased him. He knew my father years ago, and he sent me a polite note this afternoon, saying he hoped I would allow him to express his friendly feeling toward my children by sending them a few truffles in honor of the day. I could not refuse, and so you have a little feast at night to make up for the bread and milk breakfast." "That boy put it into his head. I know he did. He's a capital fellow, and I wish we could get acquainted. He looks as if he'd like to show us, but he's bashful, and Meg is so prim she won't let me speak to him when we pass," said Joe as the plates went round, and the ice began to melt out of sight with oohs and ahs of satisfaction. "You mean the people who live in the big house next door, don't you?" asked one of the girls. "My mother knows old Mr. Lawrence, but he says he's very proud and doesn't like to mix with his neighbors. He keeps his grandson shut up when he isn't riding or walking with his tutor, and makes him study very hard. We invited him to our party, but he didn't come. Mother says he's very nice, though he never speaks to us girls. Our cat ran away once, and he brought her back, and we talked over the fence, and we were getting on along capitally all about cricket, and so on, when he saw Meg coming, and walked off. I mean to know him some day, for he needs fun. I'm sure he does," said Joe decidedly. "I like his manners, and he looks like he's a gentleman, so I've no objection to you knowing him, if a proper opportunity comes. He brought the flowers himself, and I should have asked him in if I had been sure what was going on upstairs. He looked so wistful as he went away, hearing the frolic and evidently having none of his own." "It's a mercy you didn't, Mother," laughed Joe, looking at her boots. "But we will have another play sometimes that he can see. Perhaps he'll help act. Wouldn't that be jolly? I've never had such a fine bouquet before. How pretty it is!" And Meg exclaimed her flowers with great interest. "They are lovely, but Beth's roses are sweeter to me," said Aunt Marge, smelling the half-dead posy in her belt. Beth nestled up to her and whispered softly, "I wish I could send my bunch to Father. I'm afraid he isn't having such a Merry Christmas as we are." Chapter 3. The Lawrence Boy. "Jojo, where are you?" cried Meg at the foot of the garret stairs. "Here," answered a husky voice from above, and running up, Meg found her sister eating apples and crying over the heir of Radcliffe, wrapped up in an old comforter on the old 3-legged sofa by the sunny window. This was Joe's favorite refuge, and here she loved to retire with half a dozen russets and a nice book, to enjoy the quiet and the society of a pet rat who lived nearby and didn't mind her a particle. As Meg appeared, Scrabble was whisked into his hole. Joe shook the tears off her cheeks and waited to hear the news. "Such fun! Only see, a regular note of invitation from Mrs. Gardner for tomorrow night," cried Meg, waving the precious paper, then proceeding to read it with girlish delight. "Mrs. Gardner would be happy to see Miss March and Miss Josephine at a little dance on New Year's Eve. Marmee is willing we should go. Now what shall we wear?" "What's the use of asking that, when you know we shall wear our poplins, because we haven't got anything else," answered Joe with her mouth full. "If I only had a silk," sighed Meg. "Mother says I may when I'm 18, perhaps, but 2 years is an everlasting time to wait." "I'm sure our pops looks like silk, and they are nice enough for us. Yours is as good as new. But I forgot the burn in the tear mine. Whatever shall I do? The burn shows badly, and I can't take any out. You must sit still, all you can, and keep your back out of sight. The front is all right. I have a new ribbon for my hair, and Marmee will lend me her little pearl pin, and my new slippers are lovely, and my gloves will do, though they aren't as nice as I'd like. Mine are spoiled with lemonade, and I can't get any new ones, so I shall have to go without, said Jo, who never troubled herself much about a dress. You must have gloves, or I won't go, cried Meg decidedly. Gloves are more important than anything else. You can't dance without them, and if you don't, I shall be mortified. Then I shall stay still. I don't care much for company dancing. It's no fun to go sailing around. I like to fly about and cut capers. You can't ask mother for new ones. They're so expensive, and you are so careless. She said when you spoiled the others that she shouldn't get you any more this winter. Can't you make them do? I can hold them crumpled in my hand so no one will know how stained they are. That's all I can do. No, I'll tell you how we can manage. Each wear one good one and carry a bad one. Don't you see? Your hands are bigger than mine, and you will stretch my glove dreadfully, began Megan, whose gloves were a tender point with her. Then I'll go without. I don't care what people say, cried Jo, taking up her book. You may have it. You may. Only don't stain it, and do behave nicely. Don't you put your hands behind you or stare or say Christopher Columbus, will you? Don't worry about me. I'll be as prim as I can and not get into any scrapes if I can help it. Now go and answer your note and let me finish this splendid story. So Meg went away to accept the thanks, look over her dress, and sing blithely, as she did, up on her one lace frill, while Jo finished her story, her 4 apples, and had a game of romps with Scrabble. On New Year's Eve the parlor was deserted, for the 2 younger girls played dressing maids, and the 2 elder were absorbed in the all important business of getting ready for the party. Simple as the toilets were, there was a great deal of running up and down, laughing and talking, and one at a time a strong smell of burned hair pervaded the house. Meg wanted a few curls about her face, and Jo undertook to pinch the papered locks with a pair of hot tongs. "Ought they smoke like that?" asked Beth from her perch on the bed. "It's the dampness drying," replied Jo. "What a queer smell! It's like burned feathers," observed Amy, smoothing her own pretty curls with a superior air. "There, now I'll take off the papers, and you can see a cloud of little ringlets," said Jo, putting down the tongs. She did take off the papers, but no cloud of ringlets appeared, for the hair came off with the papers, and the horrified hairdresser laid a row of little scorched bundles on the bureau before her victim. "Oh, oh, what have you done? I'm spoiled. I can't go. My hair, all my hair," wailed Meg, looking with despair at the uneven frizzle on her forehead. "Just my luck. You shouldn't have asked me to do it. I always spoil everything. I'm so sorry, but the tongs were too hot, and I've so made a mess," groaned poor Jo, regarding the little black pancakes with tears of regret. "It isn't spoiled, Jo. Just frizzle it, and tie your ribbon to the ends. Come on, so the ends come on your forehead a bit. It'll look like the latest fashion. I've seen many girls do it so," said Amy consolingly. "Serves me right for trying to be fine. I wish I'd left my hair alone," cried Meg petulantly. "So do I. It was smooth and pretty, but it'll soon grow out again," said Beth, coming to kiss and comfort the shorn sheep. After various less mishaps, Meg was finished at last, and by the united exertion of the entire family, Jo's hair was got up and her dress on. They looked very well in their simple suits, Meg in a silvery drab, in a blue velvet snood, lace frills, and the pearl pin. Jo in maroon, with a stiff, gentlemanly linen collar, and a white chrysanthemum or two for her only ornament. Each put on one nice light glove and carried one soiled one, and all pronounced the effect quite easy and fine. Meg's high-heeled slippers were very tight and hurt her, though she would not own it, and Jo's 19 hairpins all seemed stuck straight into her head, which was not exactly comfortable, but dear me, let us be elegant or die. Have a good time, dearie, said Mrs. March, as the sisters went daintily down the hall. Don't eat much supper, and come away at 11 when I send Hannah for you. As the gate clashed behind him, a voice cried from a window, Girls! Girls! Have you both got nice pocket handkerchiefs? Yes, yes, spandy nice, and Meg has cologne on hers, cried Joe, adding with a laugh as they went on. I do believe Mommy would ask that if we were all running away from an earthquake. It is one of her best artistic tastes, and quite popular for a real lady who was always known by neat boots, gloves, and handkerchiefs, replied Megan, who had a good many little aristocratic tastes of her own. Now don't forget to keep the bad breath out of sight, Joe. It is my sash, all right. And does my hair look very bad? Said Meg, as she turned from the glass in Mrs. Gardner's dressing room after a prolonged prank. I know I shall forget. If you see me doing something wrong, just remind me by a wink, will you? Returned Joe, giving her collar a twitch and her head a hasty brush. No winking isn't ladylike. I'll lift my eyebrow if anything is wrong, and nod if you're all right. Now hold up your shoulders straight and take short steps, and don't shake hands if you are introduced to anyone. It isn't the thing. How do you learn all the proper ways? I never can. Isn't that music gay? Down they went, feeling a trifle timid, for they seldom went to parties, and informal as this little gathering was, it was an event to them. Mrs. Gardner, a stately old lady, greeted them kindly, and handed them over to the eldest of her 6 daughters. Meg knew Sally, and was at her ease very soon. But Joe, who didn't care much for girls or girly gossip, stood about with her back carefully against the wall, and felt as much out of place as a colt in a flower garden. Half a dozen jovial lads were talking about skates in another part of the room, and she longed to go and join them, for skating was one of the joys of her life. She telegraphed her wish to Meg, but the eyebrows went up so alarmingly that she dared not stir. No one came to talk to her, and one by one the group dwindled away till she was left alone. She could not roam about and amuse herself, for the burned breath would show. So she stared at people rather forlornly till the dancing began. Meg was asked at once, and the tight slippers tripped about so briskly that none would have guessed the pain their wearer suffered smilingly. Joe saw a big red-headed youth approaching her corner, and fearing he meant he meant to engage her, she slipped to curtain recesses, intending to peep and enjoy herself in peace. Unfortunately, another bashful person had chosen the same refuge, as the curtain fell behind her, she found herself face to face with the Lawrence boy. Dear me, I didn't know anyone was here, stammered Joe, preparing to break out as speedily as she bounced in. But the boy laughed, said pleasantly, though he looked a little startled, Don't mind me. Stay if you like. Shan't I disturb you? Not a bit. I only came here because I don't know many people and felt rather strange at first, you know. So did I. Don't go away, please, unless you'd rather. The boy sat down again and looked at his pumps, till Joe said, trying to be polite and easy, I think I've had the pleasure of seeing you before. You live near us, don't you? Next door. And he looked up and laughed outright, for Joe's prim manner was rather funny, when he remembered how they had chatted about cricket when he brought the cat home. That put Joe at ease, and she laughed too, as she said in her heartfelt way, We did have such a good time over your nice Christmas present. Grandpa sent it. But you put it into his head, didn't you? Now, how is your cat, Miss March? Asked the boy, trying to look sober while his black eyes shone with him. Nicely, thank you, Mr. Lawrence, but I'm not Miss March. I'm only Joe, returned the young lady. I'm not Mr. Lawrence. I'm only Laurie. Laurie Lawrence. What an odd name. My first name is Theodore, but I don't like it, for the fellows called me Dora, so I made them say Laurie instead. I hate my name, too. So sentimental. I wish everyone who would say Joe instead of Josephine. How do you make the boys stop calling you Dora? I thrashed him. I can't thrash Aunt March, so I suppose shall have to bear it, said Joe, resigned with a sigh. Don't you like to dance, Miss Joe? Asked Laurie, looking as if he thought the name suited her. I like it well enough, if there is plenty of room, and everyone is lively. In a place like this, I'm sure to upset something, tread on people's toes, or do something dreadful. So I keep out of mischief and let Meg sail about. Don't you dance? Sometimes. You see, I've been abroad a good many years, and haven't been into company yet enough to know how you do things here. Abroad? Cried Joe. Oh, tell me about it. I love dearly to hear people describe their travels. Laurie didn't seem to know where to begin, but Joe's eager questions soon set him going. He told her how he'd been at school in Vevey, where the boys never wore hats and had a fleet of boats on the lake, and for holiday fun went on walking trips about Switzerland with their teachers. Don't I wish I'd been there, cried Joe. Did you go to Paris? We spent last winter there. Can you talk French? We're not allowed to speak anything else at Vevey. Do say some. I can read it, but can't pronounce it. And he speaks Spanish. Of course, I can't speak Spanish, guys, sorry. How nicely you do it. Let me see, you said. Who is the young lady in the pretty slippers, didn't you? Oui, mademoiselle. It's my sister Margaret, and you know it was. Do you think she's pretty? Yes, she makes me think of the German girl. She looks so fresh and quiet and dances like a lady. Joe quite glowed with pleasure at this boyish praise of her sister, and started up to repeat to Meg. Both peeped, both peeped and criticized and chatted till they felt like old acquaintances. Laurie's bashfulness soon wore off, for Joe's gentlemanly demeanor amused and set him at his ease, and Joe was her merry self again, because her dress was forgotten and nobody lifted their eyebrows at her. She liked the Lawrence boy better than ever, and took several good looks at him, so that she might describe him to the girls, for they had no brothers, very few male cousins, and boys were almost unknown creatures to them. Curly black hair, curly black hair, brown skin, big black eyes, handsome nose, fine teeth, small hands and feet, taller than I am, very polite for a boy, and altogether jolly. Wonder how old he is. It was on the tip of Joe's tongue to ask, but she checked herself in time, with unusual tact, tried to find a roundabout way. I suppose you're going to college soon. I see you pegging away at your books. No, I mean studying hard. And Joe blushed at the dreadful pegging which had escaped her. Laurie smiled, but didn't seem shocked, and answered with a shrug. Not for a year or two. I won't go before 17, anyway. Aren't you but 15? Asked Joe, looking at the tall lad, whom she had imagined 17 already. 16 next month. How I wish I was going to college. You don't look as if you liked it. I hate it. Nothing but grinding or skylarking. And I don't like the way fellows do either in this country. What do you like? To live in Italy and enjoy myself in my own way. Joe wanted very much to ask what his own way was, but his black brows looked rather threatening as he knit them. So she changed the subject by saying, as her foot kept time, That's a splendid polka. Why don't you go and try it? If you'll come too, he answered with a gallant little bow. I can't, for I told Meg I wouldn't because. There, Joe stopped and looked undecided whether to tell or to laugh. Because what? You won't tell? Never. Well, I've had a bad trick of standing before the fire, and so I burned my frocks, and I scorched this one, though it's nicely mended, it shows, but Meg told me to keep still, so no one would see it. You may laugh if you want to. It's funny, I know. But Laurie didn't laugh. He only looked down a minute, and the expression of his face puzzled Joe, when he said very gently, Never mind that. I'll tell you how we can manage. Then there's a long hall out there. We can dance grandly, and no one will see us. Please come. Joe thanked him and gladly went, wishing she had two neat gloves when she saw the nice pearled ones her partner wore. The hall was empty, and they had a grand polka, for Laurie danced well and taught her the German step, which delighted Joe, being full of swing and spring. When the music stopped, they sat down on the stairs to get their breath. and Laurie was in the midst of an account of a students' festival at Heidelberg when Meg appeared in search of her sister. She beckoned, and Joe reluctantly followed her into a side room, where she found her on a sofa holding her foot and looking pale. I sprained my ankle. That stupid high heel turned and gave me a sad wrench. It aches so. I can hardly stand. And I don't know how I'm ever going to get home, she said, rocking to and fro in pain. I knew you hurt your feet with those silly shoes. I'm sorry, but I don't see what you can do except get a carriage or stay here all night, answered Joe, softly rubbing the poor ankle as she spoke. I can't have a carriage without its costing ever so much. I dare say I can't get one at all, for most people come in their own, and it's a long way to the stable, and no one to send. I'll go. No, indeed, it's past 9 and dark as Egypt. I can't stay here, for the house is full. Sally has some girls staying with her. I'll rest till Hannah comes, and do the best I can. I'll ask Laurie. He'll go, said Joe, looking relieved as the idea occurred to her. Mercy, no! Don't ask or tell anyone. Get me my rubbers, and put these slippers with our things. I can't dance any more, but as soon as supper is over, watch for Hannah and tell me the minute she comes. They are going out to supper now. I'll stay with you. I'd rather. No, dear, run along and bring me some coffee. I'm so tired I can't stir. So Meg reclined with rubbers well hidden, and Joe went blundering away to the dining room, which she found after going into a china closet and opening the door of a room where old Mr. Gardner was taking a little private refreshment. Making a dart at the table, she secured the coffee, which she immediately spilled, thereby making the front of her dress as bad as the back. Oh dear, what a blunderbuss I am! Exclaimed Joe, finishing Meg's glove by scrubbing her gown with it. Can I help you? Said a friendly voice, and there was Laurie with a full cup in one hand and a plate of ice in the other. I was trying to get something for Meg, who was very tired, and someone shook me, and here I am in a nice state, answered Joe, glancing dismally from the stained skirt to the colored glove. Too bad. I was looking for someone to give this to. May I take it to your sister? Oh, thank you. I'll show you where she is. I don't offer to take it myself, for I should only get into another scrape if I did. Joe led the way, and as if used to waiting on ladies, Laurie drew up a little table and brought a second installment of coffee and ice for Joe, and was so obliging that the even particular Meg pronounced him a nice boy. They had a merry time over the bonbons and mottos, and were in the midst of a quiet game of buzz with 2 or 3 young people who had stayed in, when Hannah appeared. Meg forgot her foot and rose so quickly that she was forced to catch hold of Joe with an exclamation of pain. Hush! Don't say anything, she whispered, adding aloud, It's nothing. I turned my foot a little, that's all, and limped upstairs to put her things on. Hannah scolded. Meg cried, and Joe was at her wits' end till she decided to take things into her own hands. Slipping out, she ran down, finding a servant, and asked if he could get her a carriage. It happened to be a hired waiter who knew nothing about the neighborhood, and Joe was looking around for help when Laurie, who had heard what she said, came up and offered his grandfather's carriage, which had just come for him. He said, It's early. You can't mean to go yet, began Joe, looking relieved, but hesitating to accept the offer. I always go early. I do, truly. Please let me take you home. It's all on my way, you know, and it rains, they say. That settled it. And telling him of Meg's mishap, Joe gratefully accepted and rushed up to bring down the rest of the party. Hannah hated rain as much as a cat does, so she made no trouble, and they rolled away in the luxurious close carriage, feeling very festive and elegant. Laurie went on the box so Meg could keep her foot up, and the girls talked over the party and freedom. I had a capital time, did you? Asked Joe, rumpling up her hair and making herself comfortable. Yes, till I hurt myself. Sally's friend, Annie Moffat, took a fancy to me and asked me to come and spend a week with her when Sally does. She's going in the spring when the opera comes, and it'll be perfectly splendid if Mother only lets me go, answered Meg, cheering at the thought. I saw you dancing with the red-headed man I ran away from. Was he nice? Oh, very. His hair is auburn, not red, and he was very polite, and I had a delicious bridoa with him. He looked like a grasshopper in a fit when he did the new step. Laurie and I couldn't help laughing. Did you hear us? No, but it was very rude. What were you all about that time, hidden away there? Joe told her adventures, and by the time they finished, they were at home. With many thanks, and they said good night and crept in, hoping to disturb no one. But the instant the door creaked, two little nightcaps bobbed up, and two sleepy but eager voices cried out, "Tell about the party! Tell about the party!" With what May called a great want of manners. Joe had saved some bonbons for the little girls, and they soon subsided after hearing the most thrilling events of the evening. I declare, it really seemed like a fine young lady to come home from the party in a carriage and sit in my dressing gown with a maid to wait on me, said Meg, as Joe bound up her foot with arachnia and brushed her hair. I don't believe the fine young ladies enjoy themselves a bit more than we do, in spite of our burnt hair, old gowns, one glove apiece, and tight slippers that sprain our ankles when we are silly enough to wear them. And I think Joe was quite right. And that's where we'll stop for today. And next week we will do chapter 4. Thank you guys for listening and have a great day.